Today, we're diving into a topic that has shaped countless discussions about World War II, the question of which of Hitler's divisions was considered the most effective or the most feared. Several names come up when people mention the so-called elite formations of the Waffen-SS, units like Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, Das Reich, Germania, or Viking often appear in conversations about battlefield skill, aggression, and a relentless commitment. But behind each of those reputations lies a mixture of propaganda, ideology, and selective memory. And when we peel back all the layers, one division stands out not just for its fighting ability, but for its extreme fanatical roots and its brutal legacy, the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf.
Totenkopf tends to spark strong reactions. Some people mention its battlefield achievements, others immediately associate it with atrocities. Before we go deeper into that unit, maybe we should start with the broader context. What made these Waffen-SS divisions so widely talked about?
Much of their reputation came from image rather than reality. Leibstandarte, for instance, grew from Hitler's personal bodyguard regiment into a heavily equipped Panzer division. Das Reich gained notoriety for tough counterattacks, especially on the Eastern Front. Viking, filled partly with foreign volunteers, fought in some of the harshest conditions in the Soviet Union. All these divisions became symbols of the elite narrative pushed heavily by Nazi propaganda, but the truth is more complicated. Their effectiveness varied, and their actions, in many cases, included direct involvement in war crimes. Any assessment has to consider both sides of that reality.
And that brings us naturally to Totenkopf. This unit has a reputation different from the others, darker, more intense. What set it apart?
Totenkopf's origins are what make it unique. Unlike most military divisions, it didn't begin as a battlefield formation. It began within the SS Totenkopf Division, the organization responsible for running and guarding concentration camps. Many of its early personnel came straight from that environment. They were not trained for conventional warfare. They were shaped by ideological indoctrination and the brutal culture of the camp system. The division's early development was driven by Theodor Reich, one of the architects of the concentration camp network. Under his leadership, Totenkopf embraced absolute discipline, ideological fanaticism, and a willingness to follow orders without hesitation.
So, right from the start, this wasn't a typical mechanized unit with normal army traditions. It came from a background built on violence and obedience.
Exactly. When Totenkopf was reorganized into a combat formation, it carried its ideological DNA with it. During the 1940 French campaign, the division entered the battlefield with enthusiasm, but without the same level of military preparation as the Wehrmacht. Their early performance was uneven, sometimes reckless, and their casualties were high. But what truly defined their early reputation was not their tactics, but their brutality. The most infamous example was the massacre at Le Paratus, where surrendered British soldiers were executed after giving themselves up. The officer responsible was later tried and executed for this war crime.
And there were also the documented killings of African colonial troops during the French campaign.
Yes, several attacks on captured African soldiers reveal how racial ideologies shaped Totenkopf's behavior. This wasn't an accidental pattern. It was the product of the unit's origins and indoctrination. When people call Totenkopf fanatical, it's not an exaggeration. That mentality defined how the division fought and, unfortunately, how it treated prisoners and civilians.
Yet, despite these beginnings, Totenkopf eventually became known as one of the more effective mechanized formations on the Eastern Front. How did that shift happen?
The Eastern Front changed everything. When Totenkopf joined Operation Bagration in 1941, the division was thrown into some of the most intense battles of the war. The early months were catastrophic, heavy losses, constant fighting, and long marches, but the survivors became hardened. The division evolved through bloodshed into a more capable fighting force. By 1943, it had been reorganized into a full Panzer division, receiving tanks such as the Panzer IV, Panthers, and assault guns that significantly boosted its strength. Totenkopf played major roles in key battles like Bemiansk, Kharkov, and Kursk. During the Third Battle of Kharkov, for instance, the division was part of the counteroffensive that temporarily stabilized the front. Even historians critical of the Waffen-SS acknowledge that by this stage, Totenkopf had become a tactically competent and aggressive force.
But at the same time, Their aggressiveness meant higher casualties, right?
Absolutely. Totenkopf frequently executed risky frontal attacks that resulted in severe losses. Their commanders often valued determination over preservation of manpower. The division was rebuilt multiple times, each time with less experienced replacements as Germany's manpower pool collapsed. And while they performed some impressive battlefield maneuvers, they also took enormous casualties that no army could sustain in the long term.
What about their conduct on the Eastern Front? Did their brutality continue?
Unfortunately, yes. Totenkopf was involved in anti-partisan operations and reprisals that resulted in the deaths of civilians. Their ideological background and early training carried into their wartime behavior. The division's name became synonymous not only with fierce fighting, but with systemic violence. By 1944, they were still capable of strong defense and counterattacks, but the strategic situation was collapsing. Totenkopf fought in Poland, Hungary, and Austria as the war drew to an end, often performing tactically well, but strategically accomplishing nothing to change Germany's defeat.
So, when people ask, was Totenkopf Hitler's best division? How should we answer?
The key is defining the word best. If best means fanatically loyal, aggressive, and willing to take extreme losses, then Totenkopf fits that description. If best means effective in certain battles once it became a Panzer division, that's also true. But if best means ethical, sustainable, or professional, then Totenkopf is one of the worst examples in military history. Its battlefield achievements cannot be separated from its criminal actions, its ideological origins, or the suffering it caused. Totenkopf is a reminder of how dangerous the combination of fanaticism, propaganda, and military power can be. It represents the darkest side of the Waffen-SS, a unit capable of tactical success, but defined by brutality and ideological extremism. And that's why understanding Totenkopf isn't just about listing battles or equipment. It's about understanding what ideology can do to a military structure, and why this division's legacy is remembered not for honor, but for its role in a system built on terror.
Exactly. Totenkopf's history shows that a unit can be both feared and effective, yet morally catastrophic. Its story is a warning from the past, one that needs to be understood in full, without myths and without glorification. That brings us to the end of today's deep dive. The story of the Totenkopf Division is complex, disturbing, and essential to understanding how ideology shaped the German war machine. It's a reminder that military history isn't just about tactics and battles, it's about the people, the systems, and the beliefs behind them.
Exactly, and looking at this history honestly helps us recognize how dangerous fanaticism can become when it's given structure and authority. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with us through such a heavy but important topic.
If you enjoyed the way we break down history clearly, directly, and without myths, consider joining us for future episodes. There are many more stories from World War II and beyond that deserve this kind of deeper look.
Thank you for listening, and take care. We'll see you in the next episode.